Well, 4 years ago, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who has spent his entire adult life trading on and profiting from his famous father's name, wrote, quote, "American and global consumers of measles vaccines will learn that they have been misled by the pharmaceutical industry and their captured government agency allies into believing that measles is a deadly disease." Some mothers believed Robert Kennedy Jr. when he told them not to worry about measles. Some fathers believed Robert Kennedy Jr. And tonight in Texas, a child is dead because of the lies told and advanced around the world by Robert Kennedy Jr. The victim killed by measles is described only as a school-aged child. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who has vaccinated his own children, lies about measles and about vaccines. And those lies are what propelled him into a seat in the cabinet room today, where his famous father once occupied the Attorney General's seat during cabinet meetings, with his famous uncle, John F. Kennedy, occupying the president's seat in those same cabinet meetings. That was the 1960s. In the cabinet room today, Robert Kennedy Jr. showed not the slightest sign of being even slightly moved by a child who was not vaccinated for measles being killed by measles.
There have been 4 measles outbreaks this year. In this country last year, there were 16. So it's not unusual. We have measles outbreaks every year.
No big deal, not unusual. On the day a child dies from his kind of advice. We have measles outbreaks every year, thanks to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Before Robert Kennedy Jr.'s anti-vaccine preaching took hold in this country, measles was officially declared eliminated from the United States of America in the year 2000. Eliminated. 0 outbreaks, 0 deaths. Then came the deadly lies of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the lies that earned him his chair in the cabinet room today, where more lies were publicly told in the cabinet room by more people than any other cabinet meeting in the history of the White House. In every other presidency, cabinet meetings were closed-door events. They were not clown shows for the cameras. In the pre-television age, when presidential staffs were much smaller, they relied much more on the cabinet in those cabinet meetings. And those cabinet meetings were much more substantive and serious. Cabinet meetings held by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt in that same cabinet room with the door closed and no cameras present included strategizing for lifting this country out of the Great Depression in the 1930s, and then even more dramatic strategizing about how to win World War II. In the more modern presidencies since then, cabinet meetings became much less frequent and much less important over time. Today, Donald Trump became the first president in history to invite the richest person in the world to speak in a cabinet meeting simply because he is the richest person in the world. That's the only reason Elon Musk was invited to today's cabinet meeting, where every member of the Trump cabinet stared at Elon Musk as if they were staring at their boss. Billionaires in the cabinet is a Trump innovation. Prior to Donald Trump, no president invited a billionaire to be a member of the cabinet or attend the cabinet meeting. Donald Trump has at least 3 billionaires right at the table with him as members of the cabinet. But Donald Trump's cabinet billionaires know that they will never come close to being as rich as Elon Musk. But if they worship him enough publicly, Elon Musk might make those billionaires a lot richer in the future by letting them in on some of his deals, and he might do that for Robert Kennedy Jr. and everyone else in that cabinet room today. Elon Musk has received massive government subsidies to achieve his wealth. Elon Musk has invented nothing. Elon Musk invested in an electric car company that already existed, which then became hugely successful by selling electric cars to liberal Americans, mostly in California at first, who thought By buying those electric cars, they were helping to save the planet. And instead, that money from liberal Americans hoping to save the planet made Elon Musk the richest person in the world. And then he used that money to buy the presidency for someone who doesn't believe climate change is a problem and who wants to burn as much oil as possible. Elon Musk knows more than I do about electric cars. Elon Musk knows more than I do about rockets. But Elon Musk is an utter ignoramus about American history and American government. With his brain warmly bathed in that ignorance today, Elon Musk said this.
President Trump has put together, I think, the best cabinet ever. Literally. So, and I do not give false praise.
He's not from around here. So, there's things he doesn't know. He's from South Africa, where you don't learn in elementary school that Thomas Jefferson was Secretary of State, that Alexander Hamilton was Secretary of the Treasury. You don't grow up in South Africa having the slightest idea who was in Abraham Lincoln's cabinet or Franklin Delano Roosevelt's cabinet. He stood in that cabinet room today, having absolutely no idea who Frances Perkins is, the first woman member of a cabinet, President Roosevelt's Secretary of Labor. She created the biggest, most enduring, most important program in the history of American government, Social Security. That was her idea, and she got it done. Nothing anyone in that room today does in the next 4 years will last as long as Social Security. Nothing Elon Musk ever does in his life will last as long as what Frances Perkins created as Secretary of Labor in 1935, which, in addition to Social Security, includes things like the minimum wage, the 40-hour work week, things that have become so essential to the fabric of American life that people think that they were always there. But no, those were Frances Perkins' ideas. When Elon Musk took up residence in Canada at age 17, he certainly didn't spend his time studying American history or American government. One of the joys for Donald Trump, no doubt, of having Elon Musk in the cabinet room with him today is that for the first time in the cabinet room, Donald Trump might not be the most ignorant person in the cabinet room about American government. Donald Trump took questions from very tame, very well-behaved, mild-mannered members of the White House press corps in the cabinet room, who did not scream questions at him the way they always screamed their questions at Joe Biden. They didn't, and the way they screamed their questions at Joe Biden's press secretary, they didn't do that. And to every question, Donald Trump gave a response that included at least one lie. Every single one of them. And on the day that Donald Trump was doing that, as if on cue, Washington was graced with an article praising Donald Trump for taking more questions in his first month than President Biden did in his first month or President Obama did in his first month. The National Journal frequently does good work, but it is frequently imprisoned in the conventions of the Washington press corps. And there's nothing the Washington press corps cares about more than asking presidents questions. And I mean, they care about the questions. They do not care about the answers, and they prove that. They do not know that a lie is not an answer. And so, yes, Donald Trump took more than 1,000 questions in his first month, and he did not answer any of them because a lie is not an answer. Having watched how easy it is for Donald Trump to lie to the White House press corps, Elon Musk has decided to do exactly the same thing. One of the lies he told today was that he restored the funding of Ebola prevention, and there was no interruption in it. And that is not true, as Rachel pointed out in the last hour. That is a lie, as we'll report in more detail later in this hour. Donald Trump, in an echo of his joy about the nickname for his first Secretary of Defense, reveled in the nickname for his choice of Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, retired General Dan Kane.
Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Yes, sir.
And Raisin Cain, I liked him right from the beginning. As soon as I heard his name, I said, that's my guy.
Raisin Cain, that's my guy. The guy who chooses people based on their nicknames is not going to give you the best cabinet ever.
We are going to appoint Mad Dog Mattis as our Secretary of Defense. But we're not announcing it till Monday, so don't tell anybody. Mad Dog. He's great. He is great.
General, as you know, James Mad Dog, shouldn't say it in this room, Mattis. Now, there's a reason they call him Mad Dog Mattis. Never lost a battle.
He lost his battle with Donald Trump. When Donald Trump's first Secretary of Defense, General James Mattis, resigned his position as Secretary of Defense, Donald Trump instantly claimed that he fired him. And then Donald Trump spent years publicly attacking him, even though he used to love his nickname. Donald Trump's lies today about assistance to Ukraine, it's a lie he cannot stop telling.
As you know, we're in for probably $350 billion. Europe is in for $100 billion. And that's a big difference. So we're in for probably 3 times as much.
Donald Trump lied about all of those numbers. And he told the lie that Europe has only loaned the assistance to Ukraine, and Ukraine will have to pay it back, but the United States will not be paid back. Here's the truth. Europe has delivered much more aid to Ukraine than the United States. Europe has delivered $138 billion in aid to Ukraine, and the United States has delivered $119 billion in aid to Ukraine. That's it. Not $300 billion. The United States has not done that. Donald Trump more than doubled the amount of aid the United States has sent to Ukraine in his lie today. And not a single White House reporter objected in any way, challenged Donald Trump in any way about telling that lie straight to them. They just counted as another question answered by Donald Trump. There are some very good White House reporters, very good. But enough of them are so weak and ineffectual that they become essential components of the clown show themselves. They are characters in the clown show. Elon Musk turns them into clowns by lying to them and getting away with it right in front of them, with none of them daring to challenge Elon Musk's lies directly to them. And of course, they do the same thing with Donald Trump. They've always done the same thing with Donald Trump. Donald Trump said something today that would have provoked any other cabinet for any other president to immediately have a meeting about invoking the 25th Amendment to remove that president from office for mental incompetence.
Canada should be our 51st state.
Donald Trump said Canada should be our 51st state. If any previous president had said that, he would have been immediately rushed to the hospital. And not one White House reporter challenged Donald Trump on that insane statement and Donald Trump's accompanying lie that we subsidize, that was his word, subsidize Canada with $200 billion a year. The United States of America does not subsidize anything in Canada. The United States of America does not send subsidies to Canada. Never has, never will. But there is no evidence that anyone in the White House press corps even knows that. Not if you listen to the way they swallow those lies that the Washington press corps fully respects and accepts as answers from the president to their important questions. But maybe the biggest failure of the White House press corps today was when Donald Trump said that he is not going to cut Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid. And Donald Trump said nothing about the fact that the Republican House of Representatives voted to cut Medicaid by $880 billion in a budget resolution that Donald Trump supports last night.
Can you guarantee that Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security will not be touched?
Yeah, I mean, I have said it so many times, you shouldn't be asking me that question. Okay? This will not be read my lips. There won't be read my lips anymore. We're not going to touch it.
That was the best and most important question of the day. And Donald Trump just said, we're not going to touch Medicare, Medicaid, or Social Security. And not one reporter in the room said to him, why did you touch it last night? Why did you support the Republican budget resolution last night in the House of Representatives that cuts $880 billion from Medicaid? Donald Trump said, we're not going to touch it. After touching it last night and him personally helping to round up the final votes to pass that resolution to cut Medicaid. The 200-year-old man appeared in the cabinet room today when Donald Trump invoked his lie about people 200 years old receiving Social Security. Remember when Elon Musk got caught lying about people with birthdays 150 years ago receiving Social Security? Elon Musk shut up about it after he got caught lying. What did Donald Trump do? He made the lie bigger. The 150-year-old man became the 200-year-old man. It was a day of false praise in the cabinet room and false praise by the Washington press corps for Donald Trump taking their questions more than other presidents have taken their questions, and absolutely no concern exhibited whatsoever by the Washington press corps when Donald Trump responds to their questions with the craziest lies ever spoken by a president of the United States.